Let's bring in one of the great broadcasters right now, a terrific player at the University of Tennessee. And he did his schoolwork as well. That's why he was an academic All-America at Tennessee as well. Friend of the show, Charles Davis from Fox Sports and the NFL Network, joining us here on the new Sentinel Sports page. Hey, Charles, Vince, and Jesse Smithey. How you doing, Charles?
I'm doing great. Glad you guys are doing so well, and I really appreciate the kind words you're saying about me, but I don't want to get in any kind of trouble. I definitely was not an academic All-America because I wasn't a good enough player. I need to add that to my repertoire, so I don't want that getting out there saying, look at Davis padding his resume again. I appreciate the kind words, but next thing you know, I'll be the one in trouble and out of a job for false statements. So how's everything there?
We're doing well, Charles. Really appreciate it. Before we'll skip Lightning 11 with 22, which is a fun segment we normally do with you because we want to talk a lot of draft with you. Okay. So, but before we do that, I saw your blog on your website about Pat Summitt, and I want you to share your perspective on Pat Summitt after her announcement and her segue into the head coach emeritus position this past week.
Yeah, I could still be writing that blog. I mean, with Coach Summitt, there's no limit to what you can say and express and feel like you're even coming close to adequately covering the subject. You know what I mean? It's just not going to be done. She's John Wooden of the women's game, but even more so, she's John Wooden of present day. I don't want to just limit her to the women's game. I'm talking about her impact overall. But I was in school. She was coaching, of course, because she's been coaching there since probably, you feel like, since the first brick went in the school. And just watching her work, knowing a lot of the players that played on her teams, I went to school with them. Those were my classmates and my friends to this day. And just hearing what they had to say, because let's face it, when you're going through it and you're playing, you're not a real big fan of your coaches, okay? Because they're always the ones telling you what? No. They're always the ones pushing you harder, demanding more, and you're thinking, I'd rather be in bed, or I've given you all I've got. But they always find a way to get more out of you. And our teams then were always going to the Final Four, always going to the championship game, and then running into someone a little bit better. When I was in school, we ran into USC with Cheryl Miller and the McGee twins and Rhonda Wyndham and that crew. So that wasn't fun, all right? But they were getting there. They just couldn't get over the hump. And I remember her telling a class of mine, she spoke in one of my classes, and I asked her what would happen when she won her first title. She said she was going to quit on the spot. She said she'd walk out of the gym and never coach another day. And I think that was frustration when you look back on it, that they just hadn't won one at that point. She was getting that reputation of couldn't win the so-called big one, which I always laugh about because how many big wins do you have to get to the so-called big one? And then once she won, she realized, walk away. I love doing what I do. These kids, whether she would say it or not, these kids love playing for me. And she made people better, all of us who were around her. The only thing I would have tell you guys is that I watched her coach and went to a practice, and she lit those girls up so hard that the day I was there, I found myself not breathing and backing away out of the gym slowly, hoping she wouldn't notice and then turn that glare and maybe some of those words on me. And I ran to the locker room and said, guys, I'd rather play for these cats than go play for Pat Summitt because she's about to kill those girls over there.
Yeah, Charles, real quick before we get into the NFL talk, staying on the Pat Summitt line, it just seemed like she was kind of a mother figure to not just the people on the team, but really Tennessee fans, even media. No, she took so many media that were at the University of Tennessee under her wing and was so gentle with them and understanding that they were just trying to start off their careers, that I think even a lot of the people in the media have a pretty much strong affection for her.
Yeah, and it would be accurate because remember, Pat knew that she wasn't just coaching to win games, she was coaching to promote a sport. And you guys know from having covered and been around, I'll put it to you this way. There are times I know that when you cover certain events and teams and leagues, that if you don't get just 100% cooperation, you're thinking, what is going on with these people? The groups that need it, that are trying to promote, that aren't mainstream, aren't part of the so-called Big Four, football, basketball, baseball, hockey, women's sports, that sort of a deal. And then you think back to people like Pat Summitt, who was at the top of her profession for 30-plus years, yet still understood what the mission was and would spend that time, as you said, Jesse, to talk to people, to educate those people, to bring them in a little bit closer, that sort of deal, so they could understand and touch their program and respect it. I mean, I'll put it to you this way. I was doing a high school, and this is years ago, all right? I was doing high school basketball and was talking with the coach before a state championship game that we were doing on tape delay, okay? And talking to her about her lineup and what she was going to do, and she had a starter who came in on crutches and what have you. She even, we heard that she's staying on crutches to keep the pressure off of her foot, and she's like, I'm not going to tell you that. And I was like, Coach, you don't understand. This is, number one, it's on tape delay. But number two, the more we can illuminate about your teams, about your program, the better for everything. No, I'm not going to tell you that. I will always remember her because she didn't get it. She didn't understand what we were trying to do. I wasn't coming at her like, boy, I'm going to run down the hall and tell the other team. That's not it at all. We were trying to show the best that we could show. Well, if there is any karma, they got beat in the game. and the next year her team was miserable, and she's no longer coaching there, which I think is one of the best things that ever happened because she didn't get it. I'm not a vengeful person at all, but she wasn't right for what was trying to get done and promoted. I'm thinking if people like Pat Summitt can do it, and everybody said, well, she was winning games. Pat Summitt did it whether she was winning games or not. The years when things were tough, she was still doing the same thing. She was still the same Pat, a little bit harder in terms of getting the girls ready to play. But she's still the same Pat Summitt. She wasn't changing that. She knew what her overall mission was. And you can't even begin to give enough gratification or thanks for what Pat Summitt has done.